Once again, my name is Jedediah Bigler. Thank you for joining me on this journey throughout this class with Sonoran Desert Institute. Good evening, Jedediah Bigler here. As you'll see, my name, the class we're in, FTH 202 Revolvers. Assignment 5, today's the 5th of July. We're going to talk about all the things you want to talk about. The first thing we're going to do in this assignment is we're going to show you all the parts. Particular interest in inspecting the health of the gun in itself. Again, we have the Taurus. Yes, the Taurus 856 38 special. I sped up the process so we can get through this video. So the gun is empty, as you'll see, and you'll see that the only ammunition I'll be using are these dummy rounds, and basically per class regulations there's no live ammunition. Thank you. Speeding up the video through some of these steps will save time, so we're doing a single action functions check. You'll see that it works, and I'm holding friction onto the cylinder. Now onto the double action, and you'll see that it works properly. 1, 2, 3. We start with inspecting the wagon wheel in itself. So we check to see if it's wiggling within spec. If it wiggles too far, the bullet in itself can end up hitting the forcing cone, and the firing pin can end up hitting this cylinder. Following that, we'll inspect the thumb release. Does it release the cylinder? Does it hold the cylinder? Following that, we will check the hammer. Does the hammer come back? Does the hammer hold? Does the trigger release the hammer? These are things we look for. So if the trigger will pull back the hammer in double action, we're good. We're good to go. Now let's go ahead and start taking off the hand grips. We're going to use our 3/32 punch. We're going to punch it a few times, and we're going to set the thing on a magnet, as you'll see. The thing we're looking for here is, does that spring have tension on it? You'll see the spring once I roll back the hand grips right here, as you'll see. Now we're looking at this spring. Does it hold tension? Will it push the hammer forward fast enough and hard enough to fire the cartridge? After that, we're going to go ahead and take off the screws from the side plate and start inspecting the gun in itself. You'll see that I take off the 3. I place them on a magnet. This third one right here is has the plunger and the spring holding on the cylinder stop into place, and also the cylinder in itself. It's important to not lose this spring right there. It's small, it can be lost. There's a reason I have a magnet. Now let's take the wooden handle of the hammer and wrap the gun 3 times and pull off the side plate. Now we're inspecting the inside. Got everything done. Key note, make sure that firing pin, retaining pin does not fall out. We're taking a look at the firing pin spring and the hammer spring in itself. You'll see those things. The firing pin spring keeps tension on the firing spring, and the hammer spring keeps tension on the hammer, pushing it forward upon that. We do have a transfer bar that will come up as the trigger is pulled and the hammer comes forward. It pushes in on the firing pin. Yes, the single and double action sear work in itself. So there's single action. You'll see that the transfer bar did come up, and as you do pull the trigger, the transfer bar will continue to pull forward and pull up, and as you pull the trigger, then the hammer will come forward. The hand comes up, moves the cylinder, and all these parts work in conjunction with each other. The firing pin, the transfer bar, the hand, the sear, the double action sear, the hammer, the trigger, and it all depends on the trigger pull. Once you pull the trigger in these positions, the gun will do all that. The transfer bar will come up. It'll be hit by the hammer, and the hammer and the transfer bar will send the firing pin forward, exploding the bullet. The hand will come back down. The next time it comes up, it'll rotate. As you see, all that happens, and everything is spring-loaded to keep everything in place. This is a good process to work with. And the final part of the internal parts to check is the cylinder stop. It is located above the trigger underneath the cylinder, and it protrudes into the cylinder on those little half moon notches. As the hammer comes back, you'll notice that the cylinder does rotate. You can pull the trigger back a little bit, rotate it all. Look, here's the deal. If it doesn't work, you're going to know. It's not going to stop it in time. And you have a good gun if it all works. Hey, so the last thing that we're going to do before we talk about my feelings about the course is we're going to talk about 10 things that I truly learned. All right, so I learned about the transfer bar. I learned it. I thought that it used to be that the hammer and the firing pin used to either be one piece, or the hammer would just hit the firing pin in itself. The next thing is the hand grips. I didn't realize that there was just one piece held on by a roller pin. I have my son's revolver, which is a single action, and it has two pieces to the hand grips. Didn't know the difference. All right, so the third thing is I truly learned the difference in double action and single action. I did not realize that that's what you call double action and that's what you call single action. I really didn't know. I'm not a big revolver guy. I'm a semi-automatic, like a 1911 guy. I get it, single action, double action, but I didn't really get it until I went through this. All right. So the fourth thing that I wanted to talk about was some of my best practices. What I learned was best practices. The little plunger and spring for the trigger and everything. I use a little screwdriver to hold into place instead of trying to finagle it with my fingers. I come from the side. I put the screw with the plunger and the spring, this side screw, I put it on and I put it this way and do it because I don't want to just drop everything in there, right? Some of my best practices. All right, so the fifth thing I learned about was the difference in single action and double action extraction and loading in the cycle of operations. I didn't know the difference. You know, you go through all 8 steps of the cycle of operations on a semi-automatic, and it's one way, really, reality. In a revolver, those are different. You load, and even the chambering and everything, it's all done. There's a chamber, and then the extraction, you take it all out. They're not in the same situation. All right, so the sixth thing I learned was it is okay to dry fire a gun. I was always taught don't dry fire a gun. The caveat there is don't dry fire a rimfire gun. So as the rimfire, it's hitting the side of the bullet instead of the center of the bullet. So the firing pin on a center fire hits the middle of the chamber, right? Not a big deal. The firing pin on a rim fire hits the side, so it could hit the side of the cylinder, and it could do damage to either the cylinder or the firing pin in itself. The seventh thing that I learned was filler gauges and proper tools. It's okay to have different tools as long as they properly work. These filler gauges, they're mechanics. I use these to check clearance on my main bearings and my gaps in the heads and everything. I also use them in guns to check the cylinder gap back here and the forcing cone gap. Is it within spec? All right. So number 8 is I learned the proper technique for tear down, more than just a filled strip on these things. I learned how to do it over and over and over. Tear down, build back up. Tear down, build back up. Take everything out, put everything back in, right? Loved it. The 9th thing I learned was how to reblue. If I'm sitting there filing on something and I have to reblue it, and then using that oil to stop the bluing situation from going too far, right? And then the 10th and final thing is I never liked revolvers until now. I learned revolvers are fun. I know that's weird, but revolvers are fun. So the final part is to find a feature in the double action revolver platform that is just kind of cool, and the development of it and everything is, you used to have, depending on the make, the firing pin used to be right there on the actual hammer, and as you pulled it back, boom, right? And then there are some that have bars that come up and they hold up, and as you pull the trigger they come down so that the hammer can actually hit the firing pin that's in here or still here but won't touch the bullet in itself. The transfer bar is the most important thing in me. that makes me think that this is what's unique about here, is the ability, as you pull the trigger, the transfer bar comes up and the hammer transfers that into the trigger.